Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Masha, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
I'm really excited to talk about your new book that's coming out really soon. But before we get to that and what you're up to, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
My very first job was translating American movies in an underground university movie theater. So I was creating subtitles. It was back in Siberia where I grew up. And I spent some time in the US before that. And after coming back, I was looking for opportunities while being in school and then university. And that was the very first job that I found.
Well, I have done over 200 interviews and nobody has named that as a first job. That is very interesting. How did that come about and how did you enjoy it?
It was through friends who knew me and who knew that I had spent some time here, and they were making fun of me for it at one point. And then one of them was like, "Oh, by the way, did you know there's this movie theater and they show American movies and they create the subtitles themselves?" And I was like, "Oh, really? Yeah, I did hear about it." And they're like, "And by the way, they're looking for someone to help out with those subtitles." I was like, "Okay, great." So the very first movie I translated was Monsters Ball, which was kind of a heavy one, but
Yes,
yeah, I still remember that very well.
I can only imagine. All right, so where did you go after translating movies? Where did you go to university for? And so tell us a little about your story.
Yeah, I studied biology. I actually wanted to study psychology, but the psychology department in my university was still very new, and I didn't know whether or not something's going to spin out of it. And my family was very convincing and very academic, and they're like, "Well, there's so many therapists, and they're all jobless, and what are you going to do with that career?" And but biology, you could go to biotech. And I was like, ooh, biotech. That sounds so great. So I studied biology back there and then transferred to UC Santa Cruz here in California, where I finished this degree. But before I went to Santa Cruz, I spent some time taking classes catching up in community college. And while I was doing that, I was also selling Cutco knives. My next random job.
Well, that sounds really interesting as well. So, when you graduated, did you end up doing biotech or what did you do when you graduated?
Yes, I did. I actually got really lucky. I went to this company. I don't know if it exists anymore, but we worked on HIV and malaria vaccines, and we worked a lot with mice. And I spent a lot of time with mice. And I had a wonderful manager who actually really saw me, like saw me.
Hmm, hmm.
And he asked me, "What are you doing here in the lab?" And I was like, "Well, I graduated. I have this degree in molecular biology, and so here I am." He's like, "But you belong with people." I'm like, "Yeah."
Mm,
And he helped me see this truth that
mm.
I didn't want to admit myself, that yes, I studied biology, but it wasn't my passion or my thing or my talent or anything. So he introduced me to his friend who was working in business development department, who
Mhm.
started giving me projects on the side to do market research to help out a little bit. And that was my way into marketing eventually.
What an absolute gift for someone to
Mhm.
see that in you and then not only tell you, but then kind of help you figure out something else.
hmm Yes, I felt really lucky. I still, when I see him on LinkedIn and his posts, I still feel very tender and like, oh, I'm so grateful for you and for helping me make that transition and connection in my own mind with what really mattered for me.
Yeah, isn't it so interesting, like why we choose a major or whatever profession we choose, and then and a lot of we have these outside influences like your parents, a wonderful impulse to want your children to be gainfully employed, right? This is a
Mm-hmm.
very it's a
Mm-hmm.
good. But that what we see in somebody else and maybe our own fears and our own background, what we think might be good for the other.
Hmm.
And sometimes, of course, when you're young, you just don't know, right? You don't know. You think I like people, but how does that translate into my job, right? Like how
Hmm.
are these necessary connectors? So you go into marketing and tell us more. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I went into the startup. I was employee number 13, and the first female employee in that organization where I did market research. It was fun and exciting, and I loved it because it wasn't in a lab and there were no mice, just people. But that's also where I faced my first conflict in the workplace. It was with this VP level guy who didn't like something that I did or how I handled something in a meeting.
Mhm,
And then he just stood in front of me, kind of towering over me, and he just went on and on and on about how this is stupid, this is bad, this is not how you handle it, and blah 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 blah, and kind of like reprimanded me,
mhm,
which put me right back into my daycare days where I saw daycare teachers doing that to little kids, and the kids froze, and so did I.
mhm.
And that's how I responded in that situation. So I just like froze. I didn't know what to say or what to do. I just waited for him to be done with his monologue, and then I ran to the bathroom and cried.
Yeah.
And back then I was like, well, I guess that's how things are because I didn't know anything. I
Mhm.
thought maybe that's how it's supposed to be. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to escalate or not escalate and what to do. But now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so not right. I would have handled it much differently.
So this thing happens to you, you freeze.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, how did the remainder of your relationship with that person, how did you go on with that person or what happened?
Yeah, it was a mix of avoiding and appeasing,
Mm,
because he was like number two most important person in the company after the CEO. So I couldn't not interact with him at all, but I tried to minimize the interactions.
mm,
I talked to my manager, who was a very young manager too. He was fresh grad, and he didn't have that much experience with conflict either. So he helped me the best he could, but it didn't really resolve the conflict. It
mhm,
just kept it simmering in the background and not visible. So yeah, I appeased, I avoided, I tried to do my best, being the good girl that I was, tried to be really nice to him and do really well, get my A's, in
right.
customer meetings. Eventually, I went to a different company where I had a different manager and we had a great relationship. And I was like, oh, so people are not supposed to yell at me. This is great.
I can just
Yeah.
imagine for many listeners this resonating. Certainly it resonates with me, avoiding and appeasing, right?
Hmm.
Sort of how do I deal with this thing I don't know how to deal with? Well, me just not deal with it, but if I have to, I can fawn, I can ingratiate, I can appease so that I don't get the ire when we don't know
Right.
how. And for some people, like they think, well, I am managing it. Like this is how I manage, and that is fine with me. I'm just going to keep the tiger at bay as much as I can and then
Mm-hmm.
go about because many people don't know there are many other possible ways to
Mm-hmm.
to interact with when somebody misbehaves at work or somebody is, or we have a conflict with somebody.
Yeah, and it really is determined by the patterns that we've inherited from childhood for the most part. It's when we end up in this dangerous situation with an authority figure or with someone who is just big and strong, and we are a small child, we adopt the strategy that worked best in the moment. And it could be freezing, it could be running away, it could be hiding, it could be yelling for some people. Like maybe their adult got intimidated by that. So then usually that type of authority figure is someone who's there present in our lives for a long time. So the pattern gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced until it becomes automatic. And then that's our default conflict behavior. And how can we know that there's another way? Because we never knew another way. And that's basically what my book is all about, to help people see that, first of all, notice what it is that your default pattern looks like. And then from that place of noticing and pausing, inquiring and exploring into where it came from, which then opens room up for choice and for making a different choice in conflict, how we show up, how we respond.
Love that because if we don't notice it's there, then we're not aware how we're supposed to fix it. How do we know that it is the best for us if we're not
Hmm.
aware of it? So your new book is called Repatterned: How to Transform Your Conflict Defaults and Reclaim Your Life.
Hmm.
So tell us about why you wrote this book and what people would expect to find in the book.
Yeah, it is about this framework for how to show up in conflict differently. And it teaches you 3 steps on how to interrupt this automatic pattern that we all have for how we show up in conflict. What inspired me to write it, I have had a fair share of conflict in my life here and there since that one manager and before that. Um, and one night I actually had this dream or realization. It was kind of like in a dream state, but not necessarily fully asleep, where I was like, I know what's going on. Like, I know why I keep stepping on the same rake and keep repeating the same pattern. It's
Mhm.
because I'm doing the same thing every time. And why
Mhm.
am I expecting a different outcome if I'm doing the same thing? What if I did the opposite? And this was such a like an aha moment, like this idea of like, oh, what if I just did the opposite? What if everybody did the opposite of what they're used to? You don't need a lot of room and awareness to notice what your pattern is and what the opposite could look like.
Mhm.
And that's when I decided to write this book. And I got my master's in conflict resolution, and I studied different coaching things, modules and programs, and that helped a lot too. I studied mediation and now I mediate as well. But um, yeah, this framework, it's meant to be simple and it's meant to be for everyone to be able to use in any moment, whether it's at work or at home or anywhere else. And it's the 3 steps: to
This is
exhale, to exhale, which creates the pause and the room for noticing and going further, and then explore, which is like thinking and noticing, what is it that I want to do right now? Oh, I want to freeze, or oh, I want to hide or run. And then engage, which is what would be the opposite of that: to stay, or to move, or to say something, or to write something. And you kind of try on those different
Mhm.
options that you think of and see which one lands the best in the body.
Mm. I love that. But I want to go back just a moment. Is it the case that you had this sort of epiphany and then you went on a journey to understand it? Is that sort of the order, or was it in the middle, like you were
Um,
in a master's program and it came to you?
it was before the master's program. I think many things led to it. It's ways both from work and from family, and different things were happening in life in years leading up to that aha moment, where I saw people who have had patterns repeating around them, and I noticed some patterns with myself that were repeating. And I had a time at work where I was very, very stressed. It was kind of a toxic culture in the workplace where I worked. And my body started responding, and I took some extensive time off and I felt immediately better. And I was like, oh, how interesting. So I started noticing patterns like that
Mhm.
and leaning into the wisdom of the body and the gut. Um, and then on top of that, this idea landed of like, oh, what if I, instead of staying and trying to appease and be quiet, what if I actually try to leave or change something or change teams? And yeah, this idea came on the footsteps of that.
Hmm. I mean, so we all have experiences, right? I mean,
Mhm.
our life is filled with experiences, and whether we learn from them or notice, I think it's very interesting why some of us notice, why some of us pause, why we try something different, or why we just keep on doing. And
Mhm.
the very little I've heard about your story from the beginning is filled with new things, adventure, trying different things. I don't know how comfortable you are with change, but you seem to do it, right? And so moving from it's a moving from one way of working and adventuring into this new realm. Has this always just been a part of you, a sort of curiosity to try something new, to investigate?
Yes, I think so. It's curiosity and its drive for uncovering something about
Hmm.
myself. Since I was about 12, I really loved taking all kinds of personality tests. And the most fascinating thing in the world was my personality to me, you
Of
know?
course.
Yeah, and I now have kids and I see how they are, and I'm like, why aren't they taking personality tests every day, all day? Because they're my age and when I started doing that. But yeah, I was always fascinated in how the brain works and how the mind works and what will make me even happier and what will bring me even more joy. And that's how I kind of go about my life. Like, does this thing bring me joy? A little bit like Marie Kondo. Or will this thing bring me more joy? And yeah, the curiosity is always there. And my parents always encouraged it and supported me in whatever it is I wanted to explore. And I think that played a huge role.
Hmm. So when people find themselves stuck, they're stuck in a particular pattern. So we'll talk like at work and how they
Hmm.
respond to the circumstances around them or the people around them. To get into this pattern or to use this model that you have to disrupt the pattern of
Hmm.
exhale, explore, and engage. How does somebody, how do we inspire people to want that, to take that
Mm.
pause, to explore that there might be something different, maybe even something better, maybe more joy, maybe more satisfaction
Hmm.
when people are busy, people are dealing with health issues, financial issues. I mean, people are just filled with things to try and to do and to hold it together, right? Hold this little mishmash of things together.
Hmm.
So to have the space to think, I want to try something new. How do we get people to imagine that there is maybe something that's not working to try something that is?
Hmm. Um, I believe that when we are moving on the right path or towards the right goals for us or towards the right, I don't know what it is, your North Star, when we're on that path, the universe helps us along. And when we are not, it becomes more and more painful for us.
Mm,
So you mentioned health issues. I think that it's all very much connected. The more we are in alignment with ourselves and the more we are living our truth, like the really true way that we're supposed to be living, the less health issues we will have. There's a book by Lisa Rankin, it's called Mind Over Medicine.
mm,
And she talks about that when we're in the wrong career or doing the wrong thing, then our body starts sending us signals if we don't listen to our gut for, long enough, then the body starts breaking down. And that's what happened to me at that one toxic workplace. My body started responding. So it's really hard to make anyone see anything or to get anyone to change.
mhm,
However, if someone is experiencing problems, whether it's health or financial or family, it's worth thinking, why could that be happening? Where is the misalignment?
mm,
And that's probably the first step to notice the problems and think like, oh, do I really want to continue on this path where, I'm having insomnia and my glucose is too high and I'm having heart murmurs here and there. And why is that? Oh, wait, could it be the 12-hour work shifts or the 10 p.m. meetings? Maybe there's a different way. And it's actually really scary to even think that way because we're so used to knowing how the work is supposed to be and to
mm,
certainty. And anything that we don't know is scary. So many people stay for a really long time in
mhm,
these situations that are not working for them. And you can see that clearly from the outside.
mhm,
But when you're in it, it's so hard.
mhm. Absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking about, we talk about red flags, like this is a red flag,
Hmm.
that is a red flag.
Hmm.
And but actually I think red flags, if we actually see them as like markers, like, hey, look at me, pay attention to me so that I can do
Hmm.
something else, right? So like
Yeah.
red flags, I have this thing about gossip at work that it's
Hmm.
a bit of a soapbox for me that how toxic it is and how, but it's also for the leader or anybody in that organization, it's a good sign that something is wrong, right? Something
Yeah.
is broken. Either people need connection, they need information, they whatever it might be. But it's something that if I pay attention to, I can do something about. And
Hmm.
so maybe when we talk about red flags, if we can then ask that question, if we see it in others, like, well, what are my red flags? What is my body trying to tell me? What are my emotions trying to tell me? Is my family trying to tell me, right? Is there something out there? Because we can't fix a problem we don't see. And there is something like I think we crave regularity, which is a good thing. Like we're trying to survive. We want more than survival, but we're always looking for what can be trusted. What is the norm? What am I supposed to be doing? And when we have patterns, that is that is a good thing that we can fall
Hmm.
into this regularity. But if it's not working for us, in other words, it's making us sick in our
Yeah.
bodies or our minds or both, then paying attention, right? But like, how do we, yeah, right, drawing this attention to
Hmm.
ourselves so that we can start something different.
Yeah, there are red flags and there are also green flags
Yes.
along the way. And I think our body is a great instrument that we underutilize
Mm,
because our body knows there's a tool that Martha Beck developed. It's called Body Compass,
mm,
and it's teaching you how to lean into the wisdom of the body.
mm,
And you basically scan the body in the neutral state and notice how it feels like, what sensations are coming up. And then think of a moment that was really triggering or really intense, something just horribly wrong, and see how your body responds to that. And that's your body know. And you notice the sensations and the feelings and the muscle tension and what the jaw feels like and how breathing is and the heartbeat. And then you think of a very, very pleasant memory where you were in the flow, where you were just happy, top of the world, and how amazing that was. And then lean in to notice what's going on in the body. And that's your body, yes. So then when something is going on, if you notice the sensations or the tension or the signals that are more similar to the body no, then clearly something is off. It's not good for you.
mm,
And then if it's the opposite, then you are on the right track. So that's the green flag. The body knows the red flag. Body yes is a green flag. And you can learn that. It's not a one-time thing. Unfortunately, you kind of have to repeat it and learn to notice those
right.
sensations, but it could be so helpful. And I use it now all the time about anything. When I make decisions, when my kids come with questions, I'm like, is this a good idea? Yeah, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Love
Yeah.
that so much. I think in the world of conflict management or just trying to be healthy, and we talk about lots of different things. We can so intellectualize, right? We
Hmm.
we can try to we solve problems almost like we are machines, right? And so
Hmm.
it's a problem to be deconstructed and externally in these little components and break it apart, and then we can see the widgets and how it goes together, and then we fixed it and we move forward. Um,
Hmm.
and it misses the mark of the fact that we have these bodies, that we
Yeah.
take up time and space, and that our bodies that like what are we? Which is a really good question, right? Are which we won't have to get too metaphysical, but like what we are, if more than this, we are at least physical, right? If we're physical and mental or physical and spiritual or whatever, but we are minimally at least these bodies. And so if we're trying to think about having a good life, having a flourishing life, having good, solid relationships, then that means that we have to pay attention to our bodies and other people's
Hmm.
bodies and the wonderful information that we can find if we pay attention
Hmm.
to pay attention to our bodies.
Yes. And that made me think of your previous question about how people might get excited or motivated to change. Um, because body is a signal. And if you kind of lean into that body relaxation state where you're very content and grounded, and imagine that you have a magic wand and you wave the wand and your life is exactly how it's supposed to be. If you realize that you're actually almost in that vision, then great. Maybe you don't need to change much. Maybe you're already there and you're living in full alignment. But I would say 95% of the people are not going to be in that vision already. And that's a sign that there is a misalignment, that something is off. And if you had a magic wand, you could have that life that you want. For most people, I would say that they are able to get to that place or some version of it that will be more aligned with their vision. And the thing that's keeping them away from that are self-limiting beliefs and fears because we're conditioned and we're like, oh no, no, I could never, I could never live this job. I would not find another job, or AI is going to take over my job, or something like that. Those are all limiting beliefs because I see people finding jobs all the time and switching roles and leaving places that are not working for them or staying and making them work. So yeah, I think everybody can get to their vision of their life, of their dreams, if they have enough courage to look there and to go there.
Mm. And when I think about conflict and specifically conflict at work, but I guess just most
Hmm.
conflict is there's a misalignment, right? So I have a certain
Hmm.
set of expectations, somebody else has a certain set of expectations, and somehow we're not meeting up, we're not communicating. And I think part of, let alone just like what my role is, what's going on in this organization, it's this question of what is work for, right?
Hmm.
So what's even supposed to be happening? What kind of community should I be expecting? What kind of
Hmm.
relationships should I be building? What is going on at work? And I think so. If I have a particular vision of what I want my work relationships to be like,
Hmm.
and you have a different vision of that, right? Maybe you want it to be an extended family or your found family. And I have a very different, I want to come do my work, but I want all of my significant relations to be found elsewhere. So how do we, um, how do you see helping people have, let's say, I have a vision, but what if it's not realistic given this time, this place, this company, the people that I'm around? How to, do you have any ideas about how to maybe align a vision with, I mean, some kind of external reality or reading the room or the company or the place?
Yeah, it reminds me of how people approach negotiations and mediation. They come with a set of positions
Mhm.
that they have in mind, like I want X and Y and Z. The other person has their set of positions with, their A, B, and C. And what helps them come to any kind of an agreement or solution is to follow the whys and the needs underneath those positions.
Mhm.
What are the interests driving them, right? Like, why do we not want to go to the happy hour together every Friday? Oh, it's because this person has a family and this person doesn't. So for them, socializing at work is part of their lifestyle and ideal vision, like we were saying, for the other person, it's spending time on Friday night with their family and they're disconnecting there. However, when you're part of the same organization, you by default already can find something that you share, like the mission of the organization or the values of the organization. And if you can find, you can like level up and up and up. Like, why is this important for me? Why is that important? Why is the why important? And you kind of keep going under with those whys, maybe a few levels of whys, until you find something that they share. For example, they both care about getting paid while they're working there. And to get paid, they need to make sure their organization succeeds. How can the two of them together support the success of their organization so both of them could get paid? I mean, this is a very high level and simplified idea. But basically, yeah, what is the point of alignment that they can both connect with?
Hmm. I love that because I think sometimes that especially if I've decided this person's my work nemesis or whatever narrative I have about that person, if we sometimes we just need to start at, I want to pay my mortgage and so do you. Okay.
Hmm.
Then,
Exactly.
in order to do that, right, just as you said, and the more that we do that, the more we can humanize the other person, the more I can get rid of my villain narrative about them. I
Hmm.
can, if I choose to see that actually partnering with them helps me get my base goal and your base goal, and then we can kind of start to have, okay, well, what is reasonable? How can we all get our needs met? Right? If, if I can't make everybody go to happy hour or get rid of happy hour, why do we have happy hour? Right. And so
Hmm.
asking these curious questions to get at, right, the needs. And I think it also though takes a kind of maturity, emotional maturity to embrace live and let live, that not
Hmm.
everybody has the same needs and desires, and that we're not all going to realize that at this time. Now, maybe in the future, I'm going to want happy hour, and I didn't right now. And right, we are in flux, and we do change, and we do need different things at different times. But there's a big lip service I see to embracing diversity. Like we
Yes.
want people to come in all their glory. We want this, but then people come with differences and are like, yeah, but not that. No, you need to be about what I'm about. Um,
Hmm.
and so I think one thing I love about conflict management and helping people to discover more about themselves is maybe letting go of needing everybody to be like me.
Oh, yes. This is such a human problem and assumption that everybody is like me, everybody thinks like me. No, they're not. Yeah, people are so different. And, there's a lot of research on this, but diverse teams do perform better in the end. But as you were talking, it made me think of another way of getting over the competition, which has worked for me both at work and in my family life, especially like when the kids are in conflict. When the conflict itself becomes the enemy, and the people who are in conflict become a team against this enemy. Like,
Mhm.
look, we have a problem, you and I, right? We are not agreeing on something, or we cannot reach a resolution on this topic. Can we sit down together and think on how can we conquer this problem of us not reaching resolution together?
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's it's like just a tiny shift in the mindset, but it becomes not you're bad and I'm good, or I'm right and you're wrong. It becomes, I see that we have differences. How can we make this work for both of us with our differences so that this unresolved thing gets resolved?
yeah,
And
right.
this is also, I think, what makes a difference between like a healthy workplace and a toxic workplace where people are against each other versus people unite against a common issue or something they need to solve together. And that just brings people together so nicely.
No, so well said, right? The problem is the problem.
Yeah.
So sometimes people want to say, there's no problem here, right? And so we get that toxic positivity, we put a smile
Hmm.
on it, and then the problems go underground, and then we do get character assassination and us versus them. But if
Hmm.
we can, a lot of it is feeling comfortable or feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable, like allowing there to be problems, right?
Yeah.
There can be problems, but what does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to assign the meaning. Is the meaning that I'm bad and deficient or you're bad and deficient? Or does it mean there's a problem? Okay,
Hmm.
so let's look at the problem is actually the problem. So how do we depersonalize it so that we don't
Hmm.
get character attacks, so I don't feel? But that does require a certain level of leadership,
Oh,
a
yes.
certain level of emotional intelligence and maturity, a certain level of wanting to be a good colleague and a collegiality spirit of we are all actually all in this together. So if you find yourself in a toxic environment, how do you how what would you say to somebody to help the person, but the person help their colleagues to shift out of that?
Yeah. Couple things come to mind. One is run. No, I'm just kidding.
Sometimes, sometimes.
Sometimes that's the only way.
Right.
Um, but usually it needs to come from leadership, not come from leadership as a directive, but leadership needs to be the example of what change might look like or psychological safety might look like. Because sometimes, and very often I see this, the words that the leadership says don't quite align with what they actually do. Like they're like, oh
Mhm.
yes, we treat everybody fairly, and there's never a wrong decision or a bad decision or a bad question. And then somebody gets laid off. It's like that's not psychological safety. Those types of cultures will likely not change for a while. But I've also seen times when leadership is actually showing those behaviors as an example, and they will openly talk about their mistakes at an all hands meeting with all of their employees. And then they'll implement some kind of a process, like an escalation process for handling similar problems in the future. And they'll explain at the next all hands, this is what we've learned. And we encourage everybody to speak up. And this is what the cost is of not speaking up or avoiding or smiling pleasantly.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think leadership just, um, it's like in a family, when the parents are in conflict, kids are not going to be happy. And you cannot support the kids in isolation from their parents. Similarly, in the workplace, when the leaders are not embracing those values, no matter what the employees do, it's really hard to influence the culture of the whole organization.
Mhm.
But, I was brought in a few times to different organizations to do conflict resolution workshops. But again, that came from leadership. That's not going to happen driven by employees. It's got to be by example from the top.
Right. If we want a change throughout the organization, if the leaders aren't on board and not just in name only is actually doing, right? They're actually doing
Mhm.
it. And then
Exactly.
they are
Yeah.
setting the example of what the expectation is and how we handle being humans, which means we disappoint ourselves and others, we make bad decisions,
Hmm.
and then we acknowledge it, we learn from it, we move forward.
Hmm.
But if you are, let's suppose, you're not going for whatever reason at this time, you cannot leave
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
organization. I
Hmm.
see that your method of excel, explore, and engage, we can still, one person
Yeah.
can make a huge difference. I mean, for good or for
Yes.
ill, right? But one
Yep.
person starting with themselves. And
Hmm.
once we change, right, we change the pattern,
Hmm.
then the pattern has been changed.
Yes. Yes. That's also true for sure. If one person is ready and willing to start looking inward, taking responsibility for what's going on with them, and making different choices, it's going to affect the organization. First at a smaller team level, and then potentially has the way of growing further if people start noticing the change that happens. Like, let's say there's a pattern that is driving someone to make a choice to hide their, I don't want to say problems, but to hide whatever they don't think is optimal because it's safer. And then they notice that that's what they're doing. And instead, they try not hiding it next time, but rather putting it on the team meeting agenda to discuss with the team. And again, framing it as like, I am noticing this pattern that I am having. Yeah, make it about themselves. Like, can you guys help me figure out how to move forward from not doing that? And then it starts affecting the team and everybody else potentially in the organization. So uh, but again, hopefully the leadership buys in too and supports this change because if there are some unfortunate situations where the leadership is not going to be supportive, but if they are, then yes, there is totally potential for making it better for them. And also for this person who is alone in this, there's the boundaries that they need to learn for themselves. Like how how much is too much? What's too toxic for me? What's okay? What's safe? Where am I? And where do I start betraying myself for the sake of the paycheck?
Mm.
And just kind of digging into that and knowing it for yourself will help decide the next move, whether staying and continuing to work through it, is a better option versus not. Because in some situations you just gotta gotta change something.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that way that you just sort of talked about boundary setting. It's, a lot of times people think about boundaries as these hard, immalleable, like a fence, like a
Mm.
and maybe they are, but how do we get them, right? How do we decide what those boundaries are? And a lot of times people to say, well, you should know what they are. But what I heard is again that this sort of exploring, like, well, what is too much and what is not enough? And sometimes we find that through trial and error, right?
Hmm.
Boundaries are for us to make and for us to maintain. Oh, and you just have a beautiful cat. I love when animals join the podcast. If you're watching this, you see this really beautiful cat.
Yeah, he would scream unless I pick him up.
Now we're just gonna see his beautiful face. But this idea that boundaries, this space to explore. Okay, well, I'm feeling underwater. I'm feeling this is too much. Okay, well, what is too much?
Hmm.
What would that what does it look like for me? But again, giving yourself that space to explore. And what I want to come to what you said before about disengaging, this idea of doing the opposite, which I absolutely I love this idea. So we have this idea in the Western tradition of the seven deadly sins, right? So
Hmm.
these whether or not you believe in sin, is this idea that these particular behaviors lead you away from human flourishing, from the good life. So,
Hmm.
like if you, let's suppose, like lust is one of them. So if you have this vice, and a vice is something is oh not an addiction, but it's something like you've given yourself over to. How do you get out of it? Well, in the Middle Ages, they came up with instead of focusing on it, you focus on the opposite. So if I
Mm.
struggle with lust, I focus on abstinence.
Mm.
So my focus is not on this thing that I want, this thing that's controlling me. You don't even pay attention to it. You pay attention to the good that you want. So
Hmm.
if I struggle with envy. Instead of like, I don't want to be envious anymore, I focus on, I want the good for others. And so now I'm somebody, right? And so instead of being impatient, I focus on being patient, right? These sorts of
Hmm.
focuses. And it is what resonates with me, what you're saying, doing the opposite. Well, instead of hiding, what if I don't hide anymore? What would happen? And I can see how that would be scary, but actually also really freeing up of possibilities, this idea of allowing yourself to engage and well, and allowing yourself to explore to find out then what is the activity that you're going to do.
Right. Yeah, and it's also there's a part of psychology called opposite psychology. I think it's thought work related to, and there's also someone who's called Byron Katie, who has the work, a method for flipping your thoughts essentially to the opposite of what they are. But I think it's a very powerful idea to um, really think of what this opposite could be and could look like. And yeah, it has so much potential because it really puts you out of the pattern that you're used
Mm,
to,
mm.
right?
Yeah,
And yeah, I love what you were talking about with the deadly sins. There's a reason why that I had this idea. Maybe it's not a brand new idea. Maybe it's been around since medieval ages, but applying it now seems like something for everybody to try. You know, those
absolutely.
movies, there are movies like the Yes Day, and I think there's another one similar to that where the person just says yes to everything. Kind
Hmm.
of reminds me of that because it does open up so much possibility because we're just used to going down the same track.
Yeah.
And when we notice that there are other tracks, it's just so liberating.
I love it because it's, to me, at least it strikes me as jarring. And if
Hmm.
you want to get out of a pattern, right, if you are
Hmm.
entrenched in a certain kind of behavior, how do I get out of it? And
Hmm.
so if I think about, okay, well, how do I get out of it? What if I went the other way or jumped to the side? What would that
Right.
look like? And allow yourself to imagine what that would feel like in your body, what the
Hmm.
consequences might be for yourself or others, your job, and really start to think about other ways. But a lot of times we tend to think, at least myself, other ways are very similar to what I'm already doing, right? So
Hmm.
this is my normal, this is what I'm comfortable with, and if I want something different, it's going to have to be along the same path. These are the options I'm choosing from. But I
Yeah.
don't really allow myself to think about all the possibilities. and very
Hmm.
rarely allow myself to think about the opposite, right?
Hmm.
So if I am quiet, because that's my default, what if I spoke up? Or what if I
Hmm.
get aggressive usually and I decide, well, what if I didn't do that? How might I feel? What might happen? How might my relationship change? Or I just think that's really helpful when we think about, because you began with saying that your book is really practical, right? These
Hmm.
easy steps.
Yep.
The heart is always in doing it, but I think it's really helpful to have people imagine, okay, well, what to imagine, right? And to open up our imagining. And I don't know, I just think it's really, I'm going to be thinking more about this, about what that really would mean for my own patterns that I'm unhappy with. First of all, what are they? But then
Hmm.
if I did the opposite, what would that even mean? And might I realize something along that?
Yeah. Um, there's a cleaner car going outside my
I saw
window.
that. I will cut this out.
Like,
I do the same, like a siren will go down, but usually I
you don't
can't
hear
hear it.
it?
I don't hear it. So
Okay, great.
you're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, and the reason to start with the opposite is exactly what you were talking about, because the options we do think of are also part of a pattern.
Mm.
And we think that they're different, but really they're not that different.
Right.
But if you immediately go to the opposite, it seems so bizarre oftentimes.
Right.
But at least when you start there, the options you come up with are going to be somewhere in the range between that and where you started, rather just being all around the starting spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Because the space that we're both in with conflict management is helping people come up with
Hmm.
options, right? Helping them
Hmm.
really think about, and we know that we have limiting beliefs, and we know that when we think about, especially if we are entrenched in a position, it's like, well, no, they need to be fired. That's it. That's the only thing that will make
Hmm.
me happy. That's the only way that justice will be served. And
Hmm.
then we limit our possibility of what it is that we want realized, right? And so, but giving people more options, right? How do we do that? Really opening people up to considering different possibilities. I just think that's a really strong, easy, easy in the sense of something that can be done, right?
Hmm.
And to start looking and mapping at, well, these are all the possibilities, and then I can decide, well, why something may not work for me at this time, instead of just not even looking at it.
Right. Yeah. And we often can be surprised by the response that we have in the body when we think of these different options,
Mhm.
even the opposite.
Yeah.
Not always the opposite, but sometimes you imagine, if you, let's say you're quiet and you imagine um, writing a message or saying something in the moment, your body might feel a rush of energy. And you might be surprised by it and be like, "Oh, yes, that's what I want to do. It feels so nice." But if you didn't think of the opposite, you would never know that that's a possibility for you.
Yeah. Oh, I just love that so much, thinking about more possibilities. How do we increase? Because, if we think that we act, I'm a basically an existentialist. I believe that humans are essentially free, that we have these options. But I do think that we trick ourselves into thinking that we're acting freely. We've looked at all of the possibilities and this is what we're going with. But really, we
Hmm.
typically very much narrow down what we think is possible. And that's one reason to go to a conflict coach or a specialist, an ombuds, a mediator, somebody
Yeah.
to help open up, a therapist to help to look at, well, what are live possibilities, right? Things that will, are commensurate with my values, that are going to help me get to what it is that I want, human happiness and flourishing for
Mhm.
myself and others. And uh, and the more options we give ourselves, the the more we're going to be able to think through what we want to do, and then maybe even be happier with what we have decided to do because it is from an array and we've said no or yes to a variety of different
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, yeah. And as long as we can create just enough space to open the door just a crack, then those possibilities become possible. Because
Yeah.
when we're on autopilot and we just go down the same track every day, repeat the same patterns without noticing it or realizing it, then there's less choice.
Yeah. And the pattern, I mean, we have patterns with people, right? Of course.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
when we think about they need to change, right? Well, a wonderful way to get somebody else to change is for you to change, right?
Right.
To
It's probably
needs,
the only way.
right? Exactly. That's right. Lightning is going to come down. Probably not. We
Yeah.
don't need to wait for that or the prince to come and save the situation. Um,
Mhm.
but it is really interesting. We think about what narrative we've given ourselves for something to change, and it's usually very external, which is sad because we actually do have the power. We have the power for change. We have the power for our circumstances to change, and that's within us. And not to minimize, as you and I both know, people find themselves in horrible circumstances,
Mhm.
of course, and there's
Mhm.
real suffering and real bad players in the world. And that notwithstanding, it is still the case that we get to decide how to think about our circumstances, what to do next, how to put together an exit plan of whatever we need to
Mhm.
be exiting and why we need to be exiting to something. So instead of I'm going away from this, I'm going towards, and those are different kinds of decisions we're making.
Mhm. Yes, I recently wrote a post about this, that when we are waiting for someone else to do something in order to be happy, we have given our power away to them. And when we notice that and say, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually okay right now with myself, regardless of what they do or don't do, we take the agency back.
Mhm,
And it can be so empowering. Like, oh, they need to be punished or fired or yelled at or, get a bad review, or I'm going to write a bad review for them and then I'll be happy. And then they're going to be punished. Really, you're going to be yourself and you're going to be okay and happy, regardless of what happens to somebody else or doesn't happen to them. And this idea is also freeing in a sense, because when we are hooked to that,
mhm,
it literally is a hook. Like they're
mhm,
holding us by something, by a chain that
mhm,
says that, they need to, like, they have control over how we feel by changing or not changing.
mhm.
And it's just so nice to remember that actually, no, they don't. I can choose how I show up in this relationship or how I don't show up or what I say or what I do. And I have all the agency in the world over my happiness.
Absolutely. There's something to which is really good, the human condition that we want justice. We want people to
Hmm.
get their just desserts, the good and the bad. And in this life, that doesn't always happen.
Yep.
And what we think people deserve, the good or the ill, especially if it's something we think some deserve something bad because of bad behavior, illegal behavior, like really bad things that they have done. Sometimes we think if they get this punishment, then I will feel better. But it
Hmm.
doesn't really touch the harm that has happened to us. Or maybe I have been sexually harassed or I have been mercilessly bullied or worse, right?
Hmm.
Um, if I'm waiting for them to get this punishment that I think they deserve, first of all, they may not get it. And they may get it, and then what? Right? Again, it's
Yeah.
this outside of I think it's a wonderful impulse to
Hmm.
want justice to be served. That is good. But if we put all our eggs in this basket of it being the universe delivering it so that I see it, right?
Right.
Karma may be the case, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to witness it, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we think we know what justice might look like, but in fact, we don't. Like they already may be suffering consequences that we don't see. It
Mhm,
doesn't mean that they, came out of that horrible situation punishment free. Maybe they are tormented inside.
mhm,
Maybe they have financial problems that we don't know of or health problems. We just don't know how situations affect different people, and we think that we do, and we attach to this outcome that we envision for them, that we think is the right way. And when I bring this to therapy, my therapist says, "You're playing God again today, aren't you?" Like, oh yeah, yeah, okay.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely.
Yep, yep.
It is that difficult thing of being a human in the world where we have to hold the and. It's like, I want justice served and,
Hmm.
right, and I need to find how to move forward, whether or not it's served the way that I think it should be served in the timetable that I have. Because usually the world is not, I mean, the world is not under our control. We are not God. We don't
No.
get to dictate which is probably a good thing, right? That because we don't know everything, and we don't if we could one day at our workplaces or any place actually have insight into the way people have suffered and the suffering they're doing right now, they're going through right now, and the way they are showing up, we might feel very differently. I'm sure we would all feel very differently about how well actually some of these people that we've written off are actually doing, given what they are suffering or have suffered, or given their health situation, their family situation, whatever it might be. And so
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable, right? Again, it's we so much want this binary, if it's this or it's that,
Yeah.
where it turns out it's just not that easy. We have to hold a lot of things in tension in order to find the breath, right? In order to embrace reality and move
Mhm.
forward and to find goodness and beauty and health in our
Mhm.
workplaces and in our lives.
Yeah. And in a situation like that, when someone really is holding on to an idea of what needs to happen with someone else, I think this framework of mine may be very helpful, like exploring why that is so important and what's the need. Because usually when we want that, there's an unmet need inside of us. And once we see that need, we can figure out a way to close it ourselves
Mhm.
without having to wait for that other person to change, to be punished, to do whatever. Um, like, why is it so important that they are XYZ? Oh, it's because I feel insecure, or I want to feel more safe, or I want to feel like I'm taken care of. Hmm.
Right,
Right?
right. Or I would just want the world to be different than it is, right? I want the
Exactly.
world to be this black and white, the good are rewarded, the evil are outed and punished. And
Hmm.
if if you want to live in a if you want the world to be a certain way desperately, and it isn't that way, then you're not going to be able to move forward. And so I
Yeah.
think those exploratory of the why, it's so because my why of why I want this person's behavior to change might be wildly different than yours,
Hmm.
right? But neither one of us are going to be able to move forward unless we ask the question and start really exploring, why is this important to me? That's such a great question that nobody can answer but myself. And if I can't
Hmm.
answer it, that's such wonderful information. Why can't I
Yeah.
answer why this is so important? More
Hmm.
questions.
Yes.
Well, on that, I'm going to end on my last question for you. I feel like I could talk to you all day. But my last question is, as you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only are all people treated with dignity and respect, that's just base, but that people are encouraged to thrive and flourish?
I want to come back to something that we were talking about earlier. You mentioned it specifically that people treat each other as if we're all the same. And once everyone starts to recognize that, in fact, we're all different, and I know everybody says it, yes, I know everybody's different, but they don't actually embody this.
Yes.
But once more people start embodying this, that my experience is different from yours and theirs and everybody else's, then it's going to open up more tolerance and patience and desire to collaborate and curiosity, like, how are we different? I want to know more about you. I want to see how we're different and how these differences are playing together in this specific situation that we're in. I think
Mhm.
that's going to be so powerful for the world to change for the better.
I think that's a wonderful answer. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Masha, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I love the work that you're doing. I'm very excited for your new book, Repatterned: How to Transform Your Conflict Defaults and Reclaim Your Life. Whether or not you think you have a conflict management style, you do. We all do. We have a way that we deal with conflict, and it is a pattern. So I think this is a brilliant way of thinking about ourselves and doing something different. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you would like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, it's much appreciated. My latest book, How to Be No, that's not my latest book is Winning the Generation Wars at Work, Making Your Age an Asset, is available on Amazon, along with How to Be Unprofessional at Work, which is also on Amazon as well. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.